Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now that we finished covering the impossible lands last time, I figured we can return to our skill series and finally cover the athletics action. So there are 4 athletics actions that are useful in combat. And these are grapple, shove, trip, and disarm. And these are all pretty self-explanatory. Grapple allows you to roll athletics against their fortitude DC to try and grab a target. Shove rolls also against the target's fortitude DC to try and move the target away from you, and also allows you to chase after them if you so desire. Trip allows you to roll against their reflex DC to try and force them prone. And Disarm allows you to roll again at the reflex DC to try and either weaken their target's grasp of an item or knock the item out of their hands entirely. So this first video is probably going to be a little shorter than the other ones because I want to just give an overview of all the options that just apply generically to athletics actions. There are a few options in the system that just apply to most or all athletics actions regardless of which one you actually use. And so I feel like covering each of these in 4 separate videos, 4 different times, is a bit of a waste of time. So I'm just going to collate them all here at once, and in the future I can just reference back here and have a single collected place for generic athletics boosting things. So let's start with overviewing what it means to take an athletics action. And for this, I'm going to use grapple as an example, but it will apply to all 4 athletics actions. So there are 2 restrictions that you have to follow before you can attempt athletics actions. First, you need to have a free hand, and second, your target cannot be more than 1 size larger than you. If you meet these requirements, you can then attempt athletics checks as described in each specific action to attempt to do the thing. The other major restriction of note is that each athletics action has the attack trait. And what this means is that even though the athletics actions aren't in and of themselves strikes, they are still subject to the multiple attack penalty. So if you strike and then try and grapple something, your grapple will take a -5. And if you grapple and then strike, your grapple will be made at your full map, but that strike will once again be made at -5 as per usual. Of course, there are ways to get around or mitigate these restrictions, and the first I want to discuss is weapon traits. So each athletics action has a corresponding weapon trait named the same. For example, the mace has the shove trait. And what this means is that weapons with the athletics action traits can be used to perform that athletics actions even without a free hand, and it will also add the weapon's item bonus to that skill check. For example, this mace has the shove trait. So even if you have a mace and a shield, i.e. both of your hands are full, you can still use the mace to make shove attempts, but you can't use it to make grapple, trip, or disarm attempts. Additionally, if your mace is enchanted, for example, if you have a +1 mace, your athletics action, your shove attempt, will also gain that +1 item bonus from the mace. Now, the number of weapons with athletics traits vary depending on which athletics action you're trying to take. For example, trip and disarm have the most amount of weapons with their respective traits at 29 and 32 apiece. Shove has a decent amount of weapons at 13, but grapple only has 3 weapons with the grapple trait, and all of them are uncommon, meaning if you want to grapple your enemies, you're either going to need to keep a hand free or convince your GM to allow an uncommon item into your game. The next thing I want to cover is a couple of skill feats which will mitigate the downsides of athletics. Starting with Titan Wrestler at level 1, which allows you to use athletics actions on creatures up to 2 sizes larger than you, or 3 sizes larger if you're legendary in athletics. What this means is that as a medium creature, normally you're allowed to use athletics actions on up to large size creatures, But with Titan Wrestler, you can use athletics actions up to huge-sized creatures, and if you're legendary in athletics, you can use them on up to gargantuan-sized creatures. Incidentally, gargantuan is the largest size category currently in PF2, which means that if you are at least medium size, have the Titan Wrestler skill feat, and are legendary athletics, you can use athletics actions on any creature in the game. The other skill feat I want to cover is Assurance, available at level 1. This allows you to choose a skill you're at least trained in, and then whenever you would roll for that skill, instead of rolling, you can choose to just gain a flat number equal to 10 plus your proficiency bonus. What this means is that if you're a level 1 character who is trained in athletics, you could, instead of trying to roll for your athletics action, choose to take a flat 13. 10 plus 1 from your level plus 2 from being trained. At first glance, this doesn't seem all that useful. 13 is unlikely to meet an on-level DC, even a pretty weak on-level DC. And it foregoes all the bonuses you gain from strength, from item bonuses, from buffs that your friends have cast on you, and so on and so forth. However, the biggest benefit of Assurance for athletics actions is that it allows you to ignore the multiple attack penalty. So you can strike twice as your first 2 actions, and then use an Assured athletics action to gain that flat roll that isn't affected by your now -10 multiple attack penalty. Now, it is still true that that's unlikely to hit on level DC, but if you happen to be fighting creatures even a level or 2 lower than you, especially if they have a weak save in the save you're targeting with your athletics action, either Fortitude or Reflex, Assurance can usually be just barely enough to hit that DC consistently, which means that you can always, as your third action, guarantee use an athletics action on an opposing lower level creature. And finally, I'm just going to run through all the random options available in the system that apply universally to athletics actions. Starting with Brutal Bully, a level 6 barbarian feat, which allows you to deal damage upon the completion of a successful athletics action. Next is Lunge, a level 2 fighter feat. With this, if you have a weapon with a disarm, shove, or trip trait, you can use the corresponding athletics action and simultaneously increase your reach by 5 feet. Next is Explosive Maneuver, a level 14 inventor feat, which allows you after a successful strike to grapple, shove, or trip that foe and ignore the extra multiple attack penalty that would have incurred. Next is Athletic Strategist, a level 2 investigator feat, which allows you to use your investigation to devise a stratagem to modify an athletics action, using your intelligence for the roll as per normal. Next is Mixed Maneuver, a level 8 monk feat, which allows you for 2 actions to do any 2 of grapple, shove, or trip, and ignore the multiple attack penalty that would normally be occurred. Next we have Advanced Weaponry for the Summoner at level 1, which allows you to grant athletics action traits, amongst some other choices, to one of your Eidolon's attacks. Now normally I would say that granting an unarmed attack a athletics action trait isn't a super big deal, because really the big bonus of athletics traits on weapons is being able to use that action without a free hand. But because Eidolons and Summoners are sharing invested magic items, it can sometimes be difficult to fit all the invested items you want, and so being able to save your investment room from having to invest in an athletics boosting item and just put that onto your weapon can be a big deal for a Summoner. And finally, of the class feats, we have Agile Maneuvers, a 6th level Swashbuckler feat, which effectively gives your grapple, shoves, and trip the Agile trait, meaning they take a -4 instead of -5 for their multiple attack penalty. You also have, I meant to do that, a level 10 feat for the Uncommon Unexpected Sharpshooter archetype, which allows you, if you missed a foe with a ranged weapon attack, to use deception to try and shove, trip, or disarm the foe you missed. Now notably, even though you are using your deception for the roll, it does still count as taking the appropriate athletics action, meaning that if you have feats that apply to shoving targets, for example, if you have that brutal bully somehow and you're making ranged attacks, if you successfully shoved your opponent with this deception check, you would still deal that strength damage coming from brutal bully. In a similar vein, we have the level 2 arcane occult spell Telekinetic Maneuver, which allows you to make a spell attack roll to disarm, shove, or trip a target within 60 feet. Once again, these does count as performing the relevant athletics action, which means anything that applies to that athletics action will apply to Telekinetic Maneuver. So that's all for today. Once again, this is probably going to be a shorter video than usual, but starting next week, we're going to deep dive into the athletics actions themselves. We're probably going to start with Trip, because that happens to be my favorite of the athletics actions, but the next 4 videos will likely be the 4 athletics actions covered each in a row. So I hope you come back to view those other videos, but even if you don't, thank you for watching this one to the end, and I hope that you have a lovely day.